I'm going to show you my favourite showgirl costume in more detail and explain to you exactly why my showgirl era is definitely over. We made a number of showgirl costumes over the years, and we have a number of showgirl costumes still. And there was one point where showgirls were really popular, and it was a really good way to make a living as a dancer, particularly with corporate events or private functions and things like that. So I worked as a showgirl as a freelance for many years doing this, and I also hired dancers as part of my company and put freelance dancers and showgirls into events for years, events, shows, productions for years. And this is one of my favourite showgirl costumes that we made, and one that I personally have worn many times, and that my business, my shows over the years have worn many, many times as well. Many moons ago, when I was a lot younger, a lot thinner, and a lot more flexible than I am now, I loved being a showgirl. It was one of my favourite things to do. I had grown up with my mum and her friend David working in theatre and with costumes and with showgirls, and it was all I ever wanted to do and all I ever wanted to be. I only grew to 5'3.5". The half is important. So I was never going to be a Rockette or Moulin Rouge, because at that time the height for Moulin Rouge I know is still quite tall. They were way taller than me, so it was never going to be an option for me. So the only option for me was really, it sounds very basic, but was to create a business that created work for showgirls so that I could have the opportunity to be one without having to necessarily grow another 6 inches. Which, by the time I hit sort of 17, realised was not going to happen. I held out hope it didn't happen. This was one of the showgirl costumes that we made for an event that we were doing where we were in residence at corporate Christmas parties back in 2011. I think this one was first featured. It was based on a design that I did, inspired by showgirls that I saw in an episode of Frasier. So the costume designer of Frasier did these showgirls, which I thought were absolutely amazing. And I saw them and thought, yeah, we need something very similar to that. We were already doing a lot of cross-back stuff. We were already doing stuff that was quite high cut and low. So I wanted to do something that really was a nod to those costumes and was sort of our nod to those costumes from Frasier. The other thing about this costume is that we didn't really have any money at the time. So what I was designing could have been made so much easier if obviously we had the money for the materials. But like very common, we had to improvise and we had to try and go with what we had. So this lycra, it's all lycra, it's a leotard base, obviously. This lycra that is inserted into the front, which is like a red firework lycra. It's got like a lycra with a holographic twist of tiny little sequins in it. At the time was so expensive. It's still quite expensive now, but it was so expensive that we just couldn't afford to make. We had to make 4 of these, and we couldn't afford to make the full leotard out of that lycra. It would have just cost us a fortune. So instead what we did was make plain red leotards, and then we bought like 1 meter of this fabric and cut out pieces on the front, so it almost had like a waistcoat feel to it, but in the really expensive lycra. So we could have that lycra because we knew it would still catch the light because it's holographic, so it's going to bounce the light really, really well. So we could still have that holographic lycra. We cut that out and put it on the front, and then edged it with, again, holographic red sequins so that it would kind of bounce the light again. But I loved this lycra and we really wanted it, but there was no chance. The black framing of it with the elastic was, again, more out of necessity. we had black elastic, and we initially had it so that it then hemmed in so that the elastic was there, and then we hemmed it so it was just red. But in actual fact, the black made it sort of frame a little bit better. So we actually opted to flick back out, because this is overlocked on and then would be turned under and hemmed. But we actually decided to flick it back out and actually have it on show. And I quite like it. It adds just an extra sort of depth to the edge of the costume, which I think is really pretty. The beads that are on it are actually just Christmas tree beads. Again, really inexpensive at the time. So yeah, it was just trimmed just so that it had a little bit of movement. Obviously, if we'd had more money, we'd have put tons of beads on it and loads of movement. But this was, again, all we could afford, and was making the best out of a tricky situation financially. And then the sequins that are on it and the little rhinestones, again, were just an extra way of trying to make it sparkle. In the back, it's obviously backless. We had elastic that we dyed in tea, which is not unusual. We do that quite a lot just to try and get the right skin tone for whatever girl is wearing it. I don't know if this one was mine, but obviously if it was, it doesn't need a huge amount of tea to get to my skin tone, although I did wear a lot of fake tan. And then we didn't like the look of the kind of backless nothing elastic. We did this on a lot of costumes. So instead we put holographic sequins down the straps, just so that there's sparkle in the back. Obviously, you want a showgirl frame, but we couldn't afford a showgirl frame. And part of the appeal of the costumes that I saw on the Frasier episode was because I thought we might be able to recreate something really similar to that with feather boas. So we have, I think there's 7 or 8 feather boas per costume, and we bought these. You could get them a lot cheaper than you can now, and basically hand sewed them onto the costume to make them long enough to sort of be ankle length, so that they had lots of movement in them. And then we sort of sewed them on individually, and then sort of sewed one around the top so it's sort of pluffed up here. It's been in a box for a while, so she's a little bit flat, but she fluffs up really nicely. And when she was fresh and new, she definitely fluffed up a lot more. So we did get that kind of plume, which perhaps maybe lacking now, but it did have that plume, and then had the movement, which I love. I love movement. They did dance in these. We did dance in these. So they weren't just parading costumes. So we needed to make sure that we had some movement when we actually danced. Otherwise, they can look quite dull, showgirl costumes, because they can be quite static. I wanted to have a showgirl costume that was different from all the ones that you were seeing at the time. A lot of the costumes that you were seeing at the time kind of had a very sort of traditional belly dancer sequin leotard in the front and sort of like a plume on the back, and it was all short. And so I wanted something that looked different. I didn't want to look like all the other showgirls that were out there. Not that there was many when we first started, but there definitely was more and more over time. And yeah, I wanted it to have a different look to it. In addition to the costume, they also had plumes. They were just small plumes. So we made pillbox hats with a big bow, and then they sat on the head, and they were simply hair gripped in. And if you had the knack, you could hair grip them really tight and really quickly, because there were some quick changes. I've definitely done some quick changes in this costume, and you could just bink bink. We tried all kinds of fastenings and fittings for these, and honestly, the best thing was just hair grips straight up, straight through the hair and straight up, and it held them so tight. And like I say, if you got the knack of it, you could really make sure that they were held in, and it was going to be better than any clip or band. We first had them on bands and clips, and it just, nope, hair grips. We also had gloves, which again, we used the really fancy lycra for, because we used the scraps down the side for them. Initially we were going to use red, but once we realised when we put the sort of waistcoat fronts on that we had enough lycra left, if we topped it with red, then we had enough left to get sleeves. So each costume also had sleeves in the same lycra that catches the light. It's faded a little bit over the years, but once under stage lights, it looks really cool. If you like seeing all the detail of this costume and hearing a little bit more about its backstory, then make sure you go and have a look at my channel, where I am also highlighting some of the other costumes in our collection, and make sure you come back next Thursday where I will be sharing another one with you.